The ambulance can't enter without clearance. Vivian Kershaw's voice crackled through the intercom, sharp and deliberate, slicing through the wail of sirens outside the gate. You should have filed the emergency access request in advance, Mr. Ward. We have rules for a reason. My wife, Clara, gasped beside me in the passenger seat, each breath shallower than the last, her fingers trembling around the oxygen mask that had stopped hissing minutes ago. The red and blue light strobed across the wrought iron barrier, reflecting off her tear-streaked face. "She's dying!" I shouted, but Vivian's tone didn't waver. "Then call 911. HOA protocol isn't my problem." For a moment, all I could hear was Clara's ragged breathing and the hollow click of the intercom ending. Then the paramedic's voice cut through the night. "Sir, we're losing her. We need inside now." The gate loomed ahead, taller than a truck, reinforced steel installed under Vivian's security initiative. The same system I'd warned her was unsafe. I didn't think. I put the call on speaker, loud enough for dispatch to record. "This is Elias Ward. I'm breaching the gate under emergency necessity. Document this." Then I dropped the phone, slammed the gear shift, and floored the gas. The metal screamed as the plow on my truck tore through the lock. The gate folded inward like paper, sparks bursting under the headlights. The ambulance roared forward seconds later, sirens clearing the air. Clara's hand slipped from mine as the paramedics lifted her out, their voices a blur of medical code and urgency. I stumbled back, chest heaving, watching the lights disappear down Brookhaven's main street. The scent of burning rubber clung to the air. If you've ever had to choose between saving someone you love and obeying a rule, you already know which one wins. And if you don't want to miss how this neighborhood turned that night into a war, hit subscribe now, because what came next made national news. My name's Elias Ward. I'm a civil engineer by trade, emergency systems consultant by profession, and the man who designed this county's fire access protocol. Irony doesn't begin to cover it. I helped build the same kind of systems Vivian Kershaw, president of the Brookhaven Estates HOA, had just violated. She loved control more than compliance. The gate was her masterpiece, her symbol of order. And tonight, it had almost killed my wife. Clara wasn't supposed to be here tonight. She should have been home, asleep, breathing steady through the machine I'd installed after her pulmonary embolism. We bought this house because the community brochure promised 24/7 emergency readiness. That phrase was the only reason I agreed to move her here. After years of hospital corridors and oxygen alarms, I wanted her safe. That gate was supposed to be her protection. Instead, it became her prison. I can still see it, our porch light, flickering over the empty driveway, the faint reflection of my truck's headlights bouncing off the broken steel. That gate had stood for everything the HOA worshipped: neatness, uniformity, control. But when it came down, it wasn't just metal bending. It was something breaking inside me too. Vivian's rules had never been about safety. They were about obedience. And when her need for power crossed into my wife's right to live, I realized Brookhaven wasn't a neighborhood. It was a hostage situation with flower beds. People always assume men like me lose control when we act out of rage. They're wrong. I didn't crash that gate because I snapped. I did it because I knew exactly how long my wife's oxygen reserves would last. 6 minutes, maybe 7, before cardiac arrest. I'd designed those systems myself for hospital emergency corridors. I knew what that number meant. Every second she waited behind that locked barrier was another her heart couldn't afford. The police came later, blue lights painting the same street red again. I didn't resist. I stood by the crushed gate, palms up, eyes on the ambulance route. Vivian showed up in her silk robe, HOA badge gleaming like she thought it gave her authority over life and death. She called me a danger to community property. I didn't say a word, not to her, not to anyone, because I already knew this wasn't over. She'd made it legal. I was going to make it official. By morning, the neighborhood message board was a circus. My name was plastered across the front page under the title, Resident Endangers Community. Vivian's post was written like a police report, complete with grainy photos of the broken gate and words like reckless, destructive, and liable. The same people who had waved at Clara during her evening walks were now typing comments about negligence and property values. I stood by the window of our living room, reading every line while the faint sound of Clara's breathing machine hummed behind me. She was home again, alive, but pale, exhausted, and unaware of the digital trial happening a few feet away. The HOA notice was waiting on the doorstep before sunrise. Vivian didn't waste time. Notice of assessment and damages, 18,460 for destruction of communal property. The paper even had her signature, neat and centered, like she enjoyed writing it. I ran my thumb over the embossed HOA seal and set it aside. I'd spent years designing emergency systems that saved cities from lawsuits like this. She had no idea what she'd stepped into. At 9 a.m., I drove to the engineering firm, where I consulted part-time. My office sat in a concrete block near the county's main works yard. I needed space, somewhere not haunted by the sound of machines keeping my wife alive. The air inside smelled like dust, steel, and burnt coffee. My coworker, Jamal, looked up from a stack of blueprints. "Saw the news?" he said carefully. "You okay?" I nodded once. "My wife's breathing," I replied. "That's all that matters." But that wasn't true, not anymore. I booted up my workstation and opened the State Fire Code Index. Section 503.1, Access to Buildings and Facilities. I'd written commentary on that clause 2 years ago for a county safety proposal. It required unobstructed fire and medical ingress at all hours, under all conditions. The wording was absolute. No HOA bylaw, no security policy could override it. Vivian had turned that gate into a code violation the moment she disconnected the fire access override. I scrolled through the files until I found the schematic for Brookhaven Estates, buried in my old project archives. The community had been approved under the county's emergency compliance plan 6 years ago. Every neighborhood in that district was required to maintain a dual access system, manual release and fire override frequency. Brookhaven's was marked green, active, but if the gate hadn't opened for the ambulance, then that override was gone. Someone had disabled it. I leaned back in my chair, the monitor's blue glow cutting across the room. The noise of the workshop faded beneath the rush of my thoughts. This wasn't about a mistake. It was sabotage disguised as regulation. Vivian had locked out emergency access to make the gate exclusive to residents, probably to stop delivery trucks or teenagers from cutting through. But in doing so, she'd stripped the system of its legal safety layer. A change like that couldn't happen by accident. It had to be deliberate. I printed the relevant code pages, sliding them into a folder marked Incident 11A. My hands were steady, but my chest burned with a quiet, methodical anger. I wasn't planning revenge. I was building a case. For the first time since that night, I wasn't seeing red. I was seeing patterns, like I did in every investigation job I'd ever handled. Systems failed for reasons. People lied to hide them. By noon, I stepped outside to clear my head. Across the yard, a line of construction vehicles stood under the sun, yellow, mud-caked, reliable. Machines I could trust because they followed instructions, not pride. My phone buzzed again. Another HOA email. Vivian was requesting an urgent disciplinary hearing that evening. The subject line read, "Mandatory attendance, property owner ward." The arrogance almost made me laugh. She still thought this was about fines and fences. I looked up at the cloudless sky, the sound of machinery humming in the distance. My career had been built on designing safety around unpredictability. I'd planned for floods, power failures, and building collapses. But I'd never planned for someone like her, someone willing to risk lives to maintain control. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who built safety corridors for hospitals was now fighting to prove one existed in his own neighborhood. As I locked my office and headed back to the truck, I made one silent promise to myself. If Vivian wanted to play this out by the book, I'd bring her the entire library. The HOA meeting that night was held in the clubhouse, under those sterile LED lights that made everyone look guilty, even when they weren't. I parked near the back, close enough to see who arrived, but far enough that Vivian's minions couldn't corner me. She was already inside, dressed in her usual navy blazer, the HOA badge pinned just above her heart, like it gave her jurisdiction over oxygen and air. The broken gate had been temporarily replaced with a chain barrier, and even from here, I could see the dent my truck had left in the support post. It looked like a wound that refused to close. Inside, the smell of disinfectant fought with cheap coffee. Rows of folding chairs lined the hall, every seat filled with neighbors who suddenly found me fascinating. Clara was home resting, unaware that her husband was about to be paraded as a criminal. Vivian stood near the podium, chin lifted, papers in hand, voice smooth as oil. "Tonight's agenda," she began, "concerns the reckless property damage committed by Mr. Elias Ward." Her eyes flicked toward me, a smile like a blade. "We'll also discuss restitution and suspension of community privileges." I stayed silent, keeping my hands folded, watching the crowd rather than her. That's when I saw him, Miles Trent, HOA treasurer. He sat in the second row, arms crossed tight, shoulders curved inward like a man trying to take up less space than he once did. I'd met him only in passing before, retired paramedic, quiet, reliable, the type who mowed his lawn twice a week and never raised his voice. But tonight, he couldn't meet my eyes. His knee bounced under the table, a nervous rhythm that told me everything before he said a word. Vivian continued her performance, reading from printed statements about community order and discipline. Each word landed like a gavel. When she opened the floor for comment, a few residents nodded along, parroting her outrage about property values and rule of law. No one mentioned the ambulance. No one mentioned Clara. They just talked about the gate. When my turn came, I stood, steady and deliberate. "For the record," I said, "the gate was non-compliant with county emergency standards." A few heads turned. Vivian raised an eyebrow. "Are you implying this board broke the law?" Her tone was pure theater, rehearsed and dismissive. I met her gaze. "I'm saying you tampered with a safety system designed to save lives. I built those systems for a living. I know the difference between malfunction and interference." The room shifted, an uneasy murmur rippling through the crowd. Miles looked up finally, his lips parting like he might speak, but he didn't. He reached for his coffee cup, missed, then clasped his hands together instead. His fingers trembled slightly. Vivian must have noticed because she turned toward him with that same practiced smile. "Mr. Trent," she said sweetly, "as treasurer, can you confirm that all modifications were authorized?" His silence lasted a full 3 seconds. Then he nodded, eyes down. "As far as I know," he said quietly. It wasn't conviction. It was surrender. After the meeting adjourned, I waited near the exit. Most residents avoided eye contact, pretending to study their phones. Miles was the last to leave, moving slow, his briefcase clutched to his chest. When he saw me, he stopped just short of the door. "She's got everyone scared," I said. His jaw tightened. "You think I don't know that?" His voice cracked on the last word, low and strained. "You think I sleep at night after what happened?" I took a step closer. "Then do something about it." He glanced around, lowering his voice. "I warned her," he said, barely audible. "About that gate, about the override. She didn't care, said it made the community safer." His eyes flicked toward the windows where Vivian's silhouette passed in the parking lot. His fingers twitched against his briefcase like he wanted to drop it and run. "You don't understand what she does to people who cross her," he whispered. "I understand," I said, "but she's already crossed me." He exhaled hard, looking at the floor, shoulders sagging under a weight he didn't know how to set down. "I'll think about it," he muttered. Then he walked out into the night, his stride uneven, the back of his collar damp with sweat. I watched him go, knowing that somewhere between fear and guilt, a man like Miles Trent could still find his conscience. And when he did, Vivian Kershaw's kingdom would start to crack. By the weekend, the tension in Brookhaven Estates was thicker than the Florida humidity. Vivian didn't waste a second turning my defiance into propaganda. She posted flyers at every mailbox, bright red, bold font, safety hazard, resident endangers community security. My address printed right underneath. That was her way of marking territory. When I stepped out that morning to retrieve the mail, I saw 3 neighbors cross the street just to avoid me. One woman even pulled her kid closer when they passed our yard. The same people who'd brought casseroles when Clara came home from the hospital now looked at us like we were contagious. I spent that morning fixing the broken sprinkler heads by the curb, mostly to keep my hands busy. Across the cul-de-sac, laughter carried from the community park. The HOA had organized a safety awareness picnic. Vivian was hosting, of course. She was good at disguising malice as charity. Clara came to the doorway, pale but smiling faintly under her sun hat. "You don't have to stay here," she said softly. "You could go explain." I cut her off with a shake of my head. "Explaining is what she wants. I'll give her proof instead." "Ja, Sabotage." Noon, I drove to the park, the smell of grilled food mixed with sunscreen and cheap perfume. Folding tables were lined with banners that read, "Community First" and "Secure Neighborhood, Safe Future." Vivian stood near the pavilion, handing out raffle tickets like a benevolent monarch. She spotted me instantly. The smile didn't fade, but her eyes sharpened. "Elias," she called, loud enough for nearby residents to hear. "So glad you came. We were just discussing property accountability." Her tone carried the smugness of someone who believed her lies had already taken root. "I'm sure you were," I said. "You're thorough." She gestured toward the crowd. "We're all trying to heal after the chaos you caused, but it's hard when people don't take responsibility." The laughter that followed wasn't genuine. It was the nervous kind that came from people too afraid to do anything else. Then I heard something that made me freeze. Behind the pavilion, 2 board members were chatting near the equipment shed. "She said the contractor was paid extra to rewire the gate," one whispered. "Said it'd stop unauthorized access." The other laughed. "Guess she got what she wanted, scared everyone into obedience." I didn't move, didn't even turn, just listened. That phrase, "paid extra to rewire," wasn't small talk. It was confirmation. The modification hadn't been an oversight. It had been ordered. My chest tightened, not from shock, but validation. I had built enough systems to know that someone tampering with municipal safety equipment without county approval wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. When I finally looked up, Miles was standing near the refreshment table. His posture was worse than before, shoulders slumped, face drawn tight. He looked like a man trying to vanish into the crowd. Our eyes met briefly. He looked away first. Vivian must have noticed the glance because her tone turned sharp. "Something you'd like to add, Mr. Trent?" she asked, voice light but dangerous. Miles stiffened, holding a plastic cup so tight the rim bent. "No, ma'am," he said quickly, swallowing hard. "Nothing to add." That told me enough. She still had her hooks in him, but fear couldn't hold forever. It never did. As the event dragged on, Vivian gave a little speech about community integrity. She thanked the residents for their patience during the reconstruction of the gate and promised a stronger, safer Brookhaven. Her words were so polished they almost hid the rot beneath them. Almost. When she mentioned preventing future misuse of emergency services, a chill ran through me. She was turning the night my wife almost died into a political talking point. When the applause ended, I walked back to my truck, each step heavier than the last. I didn't confront her, not yet. The smarter move was patience. I replayed what I'd overheard, matching the timeline with the city's inspection logs. If she'd paid a contractor privately, there'd be no county record. That would be the thread that unraveled everything. Before I left, I glanced one last time toward the pavilion. Miles was still there, hands shaking as he folded chairs alone after everyone left. He didn't see me watching, but I noticed the way he paused every few seconds, glancing toward Vivian's SUV as it pulled away. His fear wasn't loyalty. It was survival. I started the truck and looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Vivian could smear my name all she wanted. The law didn't care about gossip. It cared about proof. And the next time I stepped into that clubhouse, I wasn't showing up to defend myself. I was showing up to expose her. That night, after the park emptied and the last of Vivian's banners fluttered in the dark, I drove back to the main gate. The temporary chain barrier clinked softly in the wind, padlocked like a trophy. Floodlights from the clubhouse spilled across the asphalt, and for the first time, I noticed the faint scorch marks where my truck had hit days earlier. The smell of burned metal lingered. I stepped out, flashlight in hand, and crouched near the access panel. If I was right about what those board members said, the proof wasn't in words. It was in wiring. I'd designed hundreds of these systems across the county, and every certified model had 2 fail-safes, a fire department radio receiver and a manual key override, both mandated under state code. But this one was different. The receiver unit, normally a small gray box mounted beside the circuit, was gone. In its place, new wiring ran to a cheap third-party controller. Someone had rerouted the power feed. Whoever did it didn't just disable emergency access, they bypassed it entirely. The workmanship was sloppy, heat shrink uneven, wiring taped rather than soldered. This wasn't the work of a licensed contractor. It was the work of someone cutting corners, fast and quiet. I snapped photos with my phone, zooming in on the serial plates and wire colors. A red tag dangled from one cable. VKS SEC Systems. I recognized the name. Vivian Kershaw Security Systems. Her initials right there on the label. A private LLC she'd registered through the HOA months ago. I'd thought it was a vanity project. Turns out it was her cover. My heart pounded slow and steady. Every detail mattered. If I brought this to the county safety office, they'd need documentation, timestamps, and chain of custody proof. I recorded a quick video log narrating the findings under the light of the gate. Unauthorized modification, remove municipal receiver, rewired for private access. The night air felt heavy, pressing against my skin. Across the road, a motion light flickered on. Someone watching. I stayed still. After a moment, it shut off again. I finished the inspection, replaced the cover panel, and drove home. The truck's tires crunched over gravel. As I turned into my driveway, and through the open curtains I saw Clara asleep on the couch. The soft rise and fall of her chest, synced with the machine beside her. That sight anchored me. This wasn't vengeance, this was protection. The next morning, I skipped breakfast and drove to the county's public safety annex, the same building where I had once consulted on infrastructure design. The clerk at the desk looked up when I entered. "Need to file a report," I said, setting the folder on the counter. "Emergency access tampering in a residential district." The clerk frowned. "You with an agency?" "Former consultant," I replied, "and the resident who almost lost his wife because of that tampering." She didn't ask questions after that. She passed me a form, and I filled in every blank: address, system model, observed alterations, photographic evidence. When I handed it back, she stamped it with a red seal and logged it into the system. "You'll get a case number by tomorrow," she said. "Inspector Feld's team handles code violations. They'll reach out." Hearing that name, Dana Feld, was a relief. I'd worked with her before. She was thorough, fair, and didn't bend to politics. Vivian wouldn't be able to talk her way out of this. On the drive back, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have gone to the gate." No name, no context, just that. I glanced in the mirror, nothing but empty road. I saved the text, screenshot included, and kept driving. Fear didn't hit me, not anymore. It only confirmed I was over the target. When I got home, Clara was awake, sipping tea by the window. "You didn't sleep," she said quietly. "You're chasing this like it's work." I sat beside her, took her hand, and said, "It is work. The kind that keeps people alive." She smiled faintly, squeezing my fingers. "Then don't stop." That night, as rain began to fall against the windows, I organized the evidence. Photos, notes, time-stamped videos, all labeled, all backed up. Vivian had hidden behind policy and intimidation, but she'd forgotten the one rule that never breaks. Systems leave trails. And I was going to follow every single one until the county saw what she'd done. By the time I walked into the HOA meeting that evening, word of my county report had already spread. You could feel it in the air, tight, brittle silence, like everyone was holding their breath. The clubhouse smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and tension. Vivian stood at the front of the room, papers neatly stacked, her expression all composure. But her eyes betrayed her. She looked like someone bracing for impact. Behind her, the community flag hung crooked on the wall, as if even it had grown tired of pretending. I took a seat near the back, same row as Miles. He didn't look up when I sat down. His fingers tapped against the folder on his lap, slow, restless. When Vivian called the meeting to order, her voice carried through the speakers, crisp, rehearsed, and laced with venom. "Before we begin tonight's agenda, I'd like to address some recent disruptive actions taken by a resident." She didn't say my name, but she didn't have to. "We've learned that certain individuals are attempting to involve outside authorities in internal community matters. Let me remind everyone, this is private property. We govern ourselves." A few neighbors murmured approval. Others stayed quiet. I raised my hand. "Point of clarification," I said. "When you say govern ourselves, does that include overriding state safety codes?" Her expression flickered, just enough for the room to notice. "Mr. Ward," she replied, "this board follows all applicable laws." "Then you won't mind explaining," I said evenly, "why the emergency access receiver at the main gate was replaced with a system registered under your personal business license." That hit like a dropped hammer. A few heads turned. Someone whispered my name. Vivian tried to smile, but it faltered halfway. "That's a fabrication," she said. "I've never—" It's documented, I interrupted. VKS security systems. Installation dated 4 months ago. No county permits filed, no safety inspection logged. I've already reported it to public safety under case number 147B. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy. Miles stopped tapping. A board member coughed into his hand. Vivian recovered fast, shifting her weight and adopting that patronizing calm she used when cornered. "Mr. Ward," she said sweetly, "your personal grievances don't entitle you to slander. You destroyed property. You endangered residents. And now you're wasting taxpayer resources because you can't accept responsibility." I leaned back, hands folded. "My wife almost died because you thought control mattered more than compliance. I'm fine with responsibility. Are you?" For a split second, she froze. Then the gavel hit the table. "You're out of order," she snapped. "Remove him." 2 HOA security volunteers, both middle-aged men who looked uncomfortable, hesitated before approaching. They weren't enforcers. They were neighbors who just wanted their lawns trimmed and their dues processed. I stood on my own, nodding toward the microphone. "Let the minutes show," I said, "that the HOA president refused to address documented fire code violations in an open forum." Vivian shouted something about trespassing as I left, but her voice cracked mid-sentence. Outside, the evening air felt electric. A few residents followed me into the parking lot, whispering. One older man, Mr. Hill from 3 houses down, caught my arm. "You really went to the county?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said. "Someone had to." He nodded once, jaw tight. "About time." When I got home, Clara was sitting on the couch watching the local news. A ticker scrolled across the bottom of the screen. "County inspectors to audit gated communities after safety complaint." The anchor mentioned Brookhaven Estates by name. Clara looked at me, wide-eyed. "You did that?" "No," I said. "The truth did." The next morning, a white county vehicle parked by the gate. 2 inspectors stepped out with clipboards, measuring tapes, and cameras. Vivian appeared 10 minutes later, flanked by 2 board members. From my porch, I watched her gesture wildly at the inspectors, her smile stretched too tight. They didn't react. One of them, a woman with a county badge clipped to her vest, shook her head and pointed toward the wiring box. Vivian's face drained of color. Miles walked by on his morning jog. He slowed, watching the scene unfold. His usual guarded expression was gone, replaced by something that looked a lot like relief. When our eyes met, he gave a faint nod. For the first time, I saw the beginning of fracture lines spreading through Vivian's control. That evening, an email hit my inbox from County Department of Public Safety. Subject: Follow-up required. Preliminary inspection confirms code violations. Full investigation to proceed. Additional documentation requested. I sat back, exhaling. The system was finally moving, not because of threats or defiance, but because I'd forced it to look where Vivian had hidden the rot. She wanted to govern herself. Now she'd answer to something bigger. 2 days after the inspectors showed up, I found a note wedged under my front door. No envelope, just my name scrawled in block letters and a short line beneath it. "Meet me behind the maintenance shed at dusk. Come alone." There was no signature, but I didn't need one. Miles's handwriting had that same rigid neatness I'd noticed at the HOA meetings, like every letter was trying to behave. I tucked the note into my pocket and waited until the sun started to fall behind the rooftops. The maintenance shed sat on the far edge of Brookhaven's lakefront, hidden behind trimmed hedges and a row of cypress trees. When I got there, the air smelled of damp earth and engine oil. Miles was already waiting, leaning against a lawnmower with his hands jammed into his pockets. His face looked older than it had a week ago, and not from time, just from guilt. "You came," he said quietly. "Didn't think you would." "I figured if you were going to sell me out, you'd do it in the open," I replied. "So what's this about?" He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes darting toward the lake, then back to me. "You were right about the wiring," he said. "She had it done off the books. I signed off on the invoice." His voice caught on the last word, like it physically hurt to say it. "She said it was a simple software update, a community security enhancement. I didn't know she was removing the emergency receiver. I swear to you, Elias, I didn't." I studied him. Sweat glistened. On his forehead, even though the air was cool, he wasn't lying. He was reliving something. "Why didn't you speak up at the meeting?" I asked. He let out a bitter laugh. Because I've seen what she does to people who cross her. You know the Simmons family? The ones who tried to sue her over the fence ordinance? She got their contractor blacklisted from 3 HOAs. They had to move. She ruined them. Miles paced a few steps, then stopped. When I realized what she'd done with the gate, I went to her about it, told her it wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. She smiled and said, "Then you're my accomplice, Miles." And she wasn't wrong. My name's on the approval. His voice broke again, softer now. I thought if I stayed quiet, maybe it would go away. But then your wife... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The shame on his face said it all. I took a slow breath. You still have the invoice? He nodded. On my laptop, I can print it, but she'll know. She checks all outgoing logs. If she sees I access those files, then we'll be smart about it, I said. Use a flash drive, offline, no trace. He hesitated, then gave a small nod. I'll get it tonight. But Elias... He looked up, eyes sharp with fear. You need to understand. She's scared now. That's dangerous. She'll come after anyone who helped you, especially me. The sound of crickets filled the silence that followed. I could see the internal war in him, duty versus fear, self-preservation versus conscience. When he finally spoke again, his voice was almost a whisper. You remember the night of the ambulance? He asked. I nodded. She called me right after, told me not to answer the emergency line, said if anyone asked, I was to say the system was under maintenance. He closed his eyes. I went along with it. I didn't pick up. I heard the sirens through my window and did nothing. I didn't move, didn't speak. The confession hung between us, raw and unfiltered. He opened his eyes again, watery with regret. If you need someone to verify her orders, I'll do it, he said. You can tell the county I gave you the document. I'm done covering for her. For the first time, I saw something shift in him, fear giving way to resolve. You're sure? I asked. He nodded. If I keep quiet now, it'll eat me alive. I reached into my jacket, pulled out a small flash drive, and handed it to him. Take this, copy everything. Invoice, email trails, payment receipts. Do it offline. I'll handle the rest. He took it with trembling hands, gripping it like it might burn him. Tomorrow night, he said. I'll leave it in your mailbox. When I turned to leave, he called after me. Elias, he said, voice steadier now. If she finds out I helped you, it's not just my job or my house, it's everything. I looked back at him. Then let's make sure she's the one who loses everything first. I got back to the house with my head full of schematics and a new kind of nervous energy. Miles's message sat heavy in my jacket pocket all day, like a coin burning through fabric. I told Clara I was going to finish the incident folder tonight, and she nodded, eyes half closed from the meds. Her calm made the room steadier. I set the folder on my desk, turned on the screen, and opened a blank incident report. This is where I did my best work, drawing lines between broken systems and human choice. The first thing I did was inventory evidence, photos from the gate, time-stamped video, my field notes, the county approvals I'd pulled from the archive, and the original contract showing Brookhaven's required dual-access configuration. I created a digital index and numbered each item. Each file name began with the date and location. Meticulous labeling isn't vanity, it's litigatory hygiene. At 9, a soft scrape on the mailbox made me look up. Miles had left the drive. No signature, nothing fancy. I took it inside and inserted it into an air-gapped laptop, kept offline for sensitive transfers. The files were there. A PDF invoice from VKS Security Systems, pay orders showing a check from the HOA account, and an email chain where Vivian requested removal of the municipal receiver and replacement with a private controller. The subject lines were blunt. The dates matched the timeline. I copied the files into a secure folder, then annotated them, pinpointing code violations, quoting statute sections, and attaching schematics showing where the municipal receiver should have been. I built a concise chronology. Timestamp, action, responsible party, law violated. Keep it short. Keep it factual. The county doesn't need drama. It needs evidence it can act on. Next, I drafted an affidavit. As a licensed engineer and emergency systems consultant, my observations carried weight, but legal formality mattered. I wrote sworn statements about what I'd seen and done, noting the 911 call recording and my announcement over the speaker when I breached the gate. I included a necessity defense, how Clara's oxygen reserves were calculated, and how delay risked cardiac arrest. Clinical, precise, undeniable. Then I called Dana Feld. Her voicemail picked up, so I left a terse message. Dana, this is Elias Ward. I filed a preliminary report. I've got documentary proof, emails, invoices, payment records. Can we meet tomorrow at the annex? Urgent. I uploaded the files to the county's secure portal and followed with an encrypted email linking the public case number to the folder. A copy went to a trusted legal contact at my firm, someone who could notarize if needed. One more worry, Miles. He'd risked everything. I didn't want his name in the front lines. I added a protective note in the submission, request confidentiality for witness sources and a chain of custody request for the digital evidence. I flagged the invoice as independent, but asked the county to corroborate through bank records and contractor licensing checks. Official channels would do the heavy lifting. Before I closed the night, I printed a 2-page executive summary for Dana. It outlined the structural hazard, deliberate tampering, and specific statutes breached. I folded it into an envelope and addressed it to her. I paused, thumb on the flap, thinking of Clara asleep in the next room. This wasn't personal theater, it was obligation. Rain began to tap the roof as I ran one last integrity check, encrypted backups, antivirus scans on the offline machine, manual check, some logged in my notebook. Evidence is only useful if it's provable. Systems fell to systems. Rules break under paperwork. I walked to Clara's side. She opened her eyes and gave that small, tired smile I knew. "Be safe," she mouthed. I kissed her forehead. "I will," I said. Outside, a county truck idled near the gate. It wouldn't be long before someone with a badge read my folder. I'd done my part. Now the county would do theirs. I sat back, breathing slow, planning next steps. If Vivian tried to intimidate Miles or smooth over the trail, the paperwork would expose it. This was procedural battle now. Cold, inevitable. I felt oddly calm. The system would take care of the rest for good. By morning, the sky over Brookhaven hung low and gray, a color that seemed to match the mood of the neighborhood. The county trucks were still parked near the entrance, inspectors moving with measured purpose. I watched them from my porch, coffee in hand, the distant clang of tools echoing off the gate. It was finally happening. The system was awake. I wasn't the one fighting anymore. The law was. My phone buzzed around 10, a notification from the Brookhaven Community Forum. Emergency inspection ongoing. Do not interfere. Vivian must have posted it. She was trying to sound composed, but the tone underneath was frantic. Control was slipping, and she could feel it. I closed the notification and headed for my truck. I had somewhere else to be today, the block behind the clubhouse, where most of the residents gathered for morning walks. I wasn't looking for confrontation. I was looking for truth to circulate on its own. When I pulled up, a small crowd had already formed near the playground. Parents, retirees, a few contractors working maintenance. Everyone was talking in low voices, throwing glances toward the inspection site. Someone asked, "Did you hear they found unlicensed wiring in the control box?" Another replied, "I thought the HOA approved that system months ago." Word spreads fastest when no one knows who to trust. I stepped closer, careful not to speak first. Let them make the connection themselves. One of the residents, Mr. Hill, noticed me and lowered his voice. "Elias, is it true what they're saying? That she used HOA funds for her own company?" I met his eyes. "You'll see soon enough." "The county's handling it." He nodded, his mouth tightening. About time someone stood up to her. Across the lawn, I spotted Miles walking toward me. He looked different, lighter somehow, though the exhaustion was still there. "You got it submitted?" he asked quietly. "Everything," I said. "Emails, invoices, full report." He exhaled, almost shaking his head in disbelief. "I keep waiting for her to show up at my door." "She won't," I said. "Not now." But I wasn't entirely sure. Vivian wasn't the type to surrender quietly. At that moment, a county inspector in a reflective vest walked past with a clipboard. "We're issuing a stop work order on the gate system," she said to another officer. "Non-compliant wiring, false safety certification, unauthorized equipment, everything's logged." I caught her name tag, D. Feld, Dana herself. She saw me watching and gave a short nod. That was enough. I didn't need a speech. The process was moving forward, and Vivian Kershaw was officially under investigation. By midday, the HOA chat threads were on fire. Screenshots of the inspection notice, photos of the county truck, residents speculating about fines and legal action. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't the villain in their story. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. The narrative was changing, and truth was louder than rumor. I decided to walk the perimeter, just to see how deep her reach had gone. Near the tennis courts, a maintenance worker pointed out a new cable running along the fence line, another security camera tied to Vivian's system. She told us to keep it active, he said. Didn't want us touching anything till she cleared it. I photographed the unit and thanked him. Every thread mattered. Later that afternoon, Clara came out to sit on the porch, blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She watched the inspectors pack up their equipment and said softly, "I didn't think anyone would believe you." "They didn't have to," I said. "They just had to see." She smiled, weak but genuine. "You always said the truth leaves fingerprints." When the county trucks finally rolled away, the neighborhood looked different. Not physically, but in spirit. People who had avoided me were now nodding from their driveways. Fear had lost its bite. Even kids playing near the cul-de-sac seemed louder, freer, like the air itself had cleared. That evening, an email from Dana arrived. Inspection concluded, multiple violations confirmed, preliminary fines assessed, further action pending administrative hearing. Attached was a formal acknowledgement. Complainant E. Ward, source verified. I forwarded a copy to Miles with a simple line. "It's happening." He responded a few minutes later. "You just gave this neighborhood back to itself." I stared at that message for a long time. He was right. For the first time, Brookhaven wasn't silent. It was watching, waiting, and no longer afraid. I set my phone down, looked toward the gate, and knew this was just the beginning of the reckoning Vivian Kershaw had built for herself. The administrative hearing was scheduled inside the county municipal building, a square concrete structure that smelled faintly of old paper and cold air. The kind of place where rules weren't just printed, they were carved into walls. I arrived early, carrying the evidence binder tucked under my arm, its pages tabbed and cross-referenced. Clara had insisted on coming, but I convinced her to stay home. The stress wouldn't help her breathing. I promised her this was the final step. When I entered the hearing room, Vivian was already seated at the long oak table across from the county panel. She wore her usual navy blazer, hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. Miles sat 2 rows behind her, avoiding her eyes. She didn't acknowledge me. That was fine. The silence between us had become its own language. Hers, denial, mine, patience. Dana Feld, the lead inspector, sat at the center of the panel. We'll begin with case number 147B, Brookhaven Estates Homeowners Association, regarding non-compliance with emergency access and unauthorized infrastructure modification. Her tone was neutral but firm, the voice of procedure. She turned to Vivian. "Mrs. Kershaw, you've submitted a written statement denying responsibility." Vivian adjusted her papers. "Correct. The board authorized updates to improve community safety. Any discrepancies are the result of contractor error." Dana nodded once, then looked at me. "Mr. Ward, as the reporting party and licensed engineer, you've provided documentation supporting deliberate tampering." "Yes," I said, standing. "The system was modified to remove municipal emergency access. The wiring was rerouted to a private control system registered under Mrs. Kershaw's own company, VKS Security Systems." I opened the binder, sliding forward the printouts. "This is the invoice showing payment from HOA funds, authorized by her signature. This," I turned the page, "is the county's original approval document, proving that removal of the municipal receiver violates Fire Code 503.1 and Safety Statute 42C. Vivian's jaw tightened. "Those documents were obtained illegally," she said sharply. "You stole them." Dana raised a hand. "Mr. Ward's evidence was lawfully submitted through the county's whistleblower protocol. Continue." I caught Miles shifting in his seat. His hands clasped and unclasped like he was wrestling with something invisible. Finally, he stood. "Inspector Feld," he said, voice unsteady but loud enough to carry. "I can verify what he's saying." Vivian snapped her head toward him, eyes narrowing. "Miles," she hissed, "sit down." But he didn't. I signed the invoice, he said. She told me it was a routine maintenance upgrade. When I realized what she'd done, I confronted her. She told me to keep quiet or lose my position. He swallowed hard, the weight of his words filling the room. She also ordered me not to answer the emergency line the night of the incident. I ignored the call. I knew the ambulance was waiting outside that gate, and I did nothing. A murmur swept through the room. Dana looked from him to Vivian. Is that true? Vivian straightened her papers, forcing a smile. Disgruntled employees often... Answer the question, Dana said, her tone clipped. Vivian's mouth opened, but no words came. The silence stretched. Every lie she'd relied on crumbled under the weight of official air. Dana leaned forward. The department finds sufficient cause to proceed with enforcement action. Mrs. Kershaw, your company and the HOA are in violation of state and county safety statutes. You are temporarily suspended from all board activities pending full prosecution review. Vivian's mask finally cracked. You can't do this, she said, voice shaking. You don't understand how communities fall apart without order. Dana gathered her papers calmly. Order built on obstruction isn't order, it's danger. The gavel struck once, final and hard. The hearing adjourned. Vivian remained seated, stunned, as the room emptied. Miles lingered by the doorway, looking drained but lighter, like a man who'd finally let go of something that had been crushing him. I packed my folder, turning once toward Vivian. You were right about one thing, I said quietly. Rules matter. You just picked the wrong ones to break. Outside, the rain had started again, slow and steady. Miles caught up beside me on the steps. It's over, he said. Not yet, I replied, glancing at the news van pulling into the lot. Now the rest of the county gets to see what kind of order she built. By the next afternoon, Brookhaven Estates was no longer quiet. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes pointed toward the sky like iron flowers. Reporters gathered near the community park where Vivian had once hosted her safety awareness picnic. Now, the same gazebo she'd used for photo ops was surrounded by cameras, microphones, and the very residents she'd once ruled by fear. The county had scheduled a public follow-up session, a requirement when an HOA under investigation managed public funds. It was supposed to be procedural. It became something else entirely. I parked across the street, watching the setup unfold. The inspectors stood by the gate with clipboards, verifying repairs. A temporary access lane had been installed beside the wreckage of the old one, functional, ugly, honest. The county seal on the barricade gleamed in the sunlight. This was no longer Vivian's domain. When I stepped into the park, a hush fell through the crowd. Not hostility this time, curiosity, recognition. People I'd never spoken to before nodded as I passed. Even the ones who had once crossed the street to avoid me kept their eyes on mine, wordless apologies written in their faces. Miles waited near the front, hands shoved into his pockets. They're making her speak, he muttered. The county said it's part of the record. Vivian appeared a few minutes later, escorted by her attorney. Her confidence was gone. No blazer, no polished smile, just a stiff posture and hollow eyes. When she saw me standing near the front, her jaw clenched, a flicker of the old defiance returning. Dana Feld stood at the podium, microphone in hand. This session, she said, is to publicly address the findings of the Brookhaven safety violation investigation. The county acknowledges full cooperation from residents, particularly Mr. Ward, whose documentation initiated corrective action. A ripple of applause moved through the crowd. Vivian's attorney leaned toward her, whispering something that made her shoulders tighten. Dana continued, voice steady. The department has concluded that emergency access was deliberately compromised. HOA funds were misused, and falsified records were submitted to inspectors. As of this morning, the HOA board has been suspended pending criminal review. The applause turned louder, mixed with gasps. Vivian's attorney stepped forward, trying to restore order. My client disputes these conclusions, he said. She acted with community safety in mind. But the crowd was no longer buying it. People began shouting over him, parents, veterans, retirees. You risked lives, one man yelled. You blocked an ambulance, shouted another. Vivian's voice finally cracked through the chaos. You think I wanted this? She screamed. You think I wanted to endanger anyone? I was trying to protect this neighborhood from outsiders, from liability, from chaos. She pointed toward me. He's the reason everything fell apart. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. No, I said, stepping closer so everyone could hear. You built this place on control, not care. The only chaos here was yours. Cameras flashed. Dana lowered the microphone slightly but didn't stop me. The crowd turned toward us, the moment unfolding like a tide. I faced them, speaking as much to them as to her. My wife almost died because someone decided her life was less important than a rule. That gate wasn't just metal, it was the line between power and decency. We all lived behind it, pretending we were safe because someone enforced order. But real safety doesn't come from control. It comes from accountability. The park went quiet. Even the reporters lowered their microphones for a moment. Clara's voice echoed in my mind, soft and steady. Tell the truth. Let it stand. Vivian tried to recover, but her words came out thin. You think you're a hero, but you destroyed community property, humiliated us, and turned neighbors against each other. I met her eyes, unflinching. You did that the moment you put your signature on that invoice. Dana cleared her throat and turned toward the cameras. For the record, she said, Mrs. Kershaw's business license has been suspended. Further charges will be determined by the state attorney's office. The crowd erupted again. Cheers this time, not anger. Vivian's attorney led her away as reporters swarmed for statements. Miles walked up beside me, his expression unreadable. You just ended her, he said quietly. No, I replied. She ended herself. Dana approached, offering her hand. We'll finalize the report next week. You did the right thing, Mr. Ward. I nodded, but my gaze stayed on the gate, the twisted remains of the system that started it all. The same gate that had tried to keep help out now stood open, wide, and permanent. Behind me, the crowd kept clapping, but all I could think was how silence used to live here. It was gone now, replaced by something far louder, truth breaking through metal. A month later, the gate was gone for good. In its place stood a simple concrete lane lined with reflective paint, wide enough for 2 emergency vehicles to pass. The new sign above it read, Clara's Passage, dedicated to community safety. The name had been Miles's idea, though he claimed it just fit the story. It did more than that. It rewrote it. The neighborhood that once watched in silence now showed up with folding chairs, coffee, and applause as the county held its dedication ceremony. The morning air was warm and clean, filled with the scent of cut grass and new asphalt. Dana Feld stood at the microphone, county seal glinting on her lapel. Today marks the end of a case that reminded us what responsibility looks like, she said. One resident's quick action and one community's willingness to confront the truth turned a tragedy waiting to happen into reform that will save lives. Her eyes found me in the crowd for just a second, then moved on. Behind her, workers finished installing the last strip of reflective tape. A small brass plaque at the base of the post bore Clara's name and the date of the incident. I hadn't realized until that moment that the date had already become history. Miles joined me near the fence, dressed in a clean polo and carrying his old HOA badge in his hand. Feels strange, doesn't it? He said quietly, seeing it finished. Feels right, I said. You did the hardest part. He shook his head. No, I just stopped lying to myself. He dropped the badge into the donation box set up beside the podium. That's where it belongs, under accountability, not control. Clara sat nearby in her wheelchair, sunlight on her face, a calm smile softening her features. When she caught my eye, she mouthed 2 words. We made it. I nodded, throat tight. The crowd began clapping again as Dana gestured for me to join her up front. Mr. Ward, she said into the microphone, on behalf of Broward, County and the Department of Public Safety, we want to recognize your actions. This community owes you more than words. I stepped up, shaking her hand, the applause rolling like a slow wave. I didn't do this alone, I said into the mic. It took a witness willing to tell the truth, a county willing to listen, and a neighborhood willing to change. I just happened to be the one who stopped waiting. From the back of the crowd, someone shouted, "To Elias and Clara!" The cheer that followed carried across the lawns and through the open gate, out into the street where emergency vehicles now had free passage. After the ceremony, I walked the edge of the property, tracing the line where the old iron gate once stood. You could still see faint grooves in the concrete where the hinges had torn free the night I drove through them. The county left the marks intentionally. Historical context, Dana had said. I like that. Scars weren't something to hide. They were proof of correction. Vivian didn't attend the ceremony. She was still under investigation for fraud and endangerment. Her once perfect reputation, now the subject of news cycles and legal filings. The HOA board had been replaced with interim leadership, and Miles had been asked to stay on as a resident advisor for the new safety committee. He declined, saying he'd rather be the guy who fixes sprinklers than the one who hands out rules. That evening, when the crowd had gone and the county workers packed up, Clara and I stayed behind. The sky had turned the color of bronze, soft light glinting off the plaque that bore her name. She reached out, tracing the letters with her fingers. It's strange, she said softly, that something so cruel could end with something so kind. I looked at the open lane stretching ahead, wide and clear. It's not strange, I said. It's balance. We stayed until the sun dipped low, the sound of cicadas filling the quiet that used to belong to Vivian's rules. This time, it wasn't silence. It was peace, the kind that doesn't ask permission. When we finally headed home, I glanced back once more at the sign and thought about what it meant for everyone who'd ever been silenced by authority in their own backyard. Not all battles end with noise. Some end with gates that stay open forever. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from.